The day the Independent Book Project was posted, I knew it would give me trouble. I'm not a reader by nature, and since there are probably more than 10 books in the world, which is the highest number I can count to, I had a lot of options. Overwhelming. A few days passed, and I still hadn't decided on a book, and after browsing my mom's collection and finding nothing that interested me, I decided to take a walk to try and clear my head. It was then that I was suddenly struck in the face by a flyer. It was a poster for a missing dog named Monster. For some reason, the idea of a dog named Monster, or furthermore, a monster dog, stuck with me. So when I got home, I looked up monster dogs, and was greeted with the solution to my problem, a little book called Lives of the Monster Dogs. Yeah, none of that happened. What I really did was look up strangest books on Google, and I saw the cover art for this one, and since that's the only acceptable way to judge a book, I bought it. The other story was a cooler intro though, right? Without spoiling too much of the book, because I do think it's worth a read, Lives of the Monster Dogs is a story about a bunch of bipedal dogs with creepy human hands coming to New York after escaping from the cult that created and enslaved them. The monster dogs were originally created for military purposes by a man named Augustus. Not really sure why giving them human hands and back problems would make them better than a normal military dog, but then again, Augustus was a psycho who sedated a cow and put its legs on backwards for funsies. The story is told from two perspectives: Cleo, a human girl, and Ludwig, a monster dog. Cleo's narration mainly focuses on how the monster dogs impact the human world, while Ludwig's focuses on the history of the monster dogs. As the story progresses, we are shown that, despite the differences in appearances, deep down, we are not so different from the monster dogs, which is really the theme of the novel. And listen, I agree with the sentiment, but I'm not sure I appreciate being compared to my grandma's crusty Maltese. I went into this book with the expectation that it'd just be a really weird Frankenstein ripoff. Like, really weird. But it was surprisingly impactful. The theme of interconnectedness is one I've always found interesting, and it's tackled beautifully in this novel. The monster dogs, despite their Google, how do I say this word? Despite their vehement denial of having any kind of ties to humanity, are mirrors of people. I think the most prominent example of this would be our narrator Ludwig and the monster dog's creator Augustus. There are so many parallels between the two, even though Ludwig is resentful of his creator. Ludwig spends his life trying to piece together Augustus's history to understand more of his own past and his purpose, much like how Augustus spends his life trying to create the monster dogs so he can achieve a heightened sense of self. Additionally, Ludwig refuses to let his family see his slow descent into madness, as he's afraid of displaying weakness and ruining their perception of him, just as Augustus hides away from his cult following when he grows old and senile. Lastly, they both deny themselves any form of closeness to other people, as they don't believe they deserve it nor need it. A belief that stems from past trauma, and they suffer for it. Another thing I really enjoyed about this book was the citizens of New York's lackluster reaction to a bunch of humanoid dogs just pulling up. Like, you'd think there'd be mass hysteria if this thing showed up on your doorstep, but everyone is strangely okay with it. Cleo attributes this acceptance to the people of New York not truly believing that the monster dogs are real, despite the overwhelming news coverage and publicization of them. What publicization? do I not know how to say anything? Publicization of them. She says, "We enjoyed playing along, which is not exactly the same thing as believing. They're in this in-between of reality and make-believe, and I think that perfectly sums up human rationality. It's much easier to see the dogs as some kind of mascot, rather than real, tangible evidence that we're only a pair of arms and legs away from being dogs ourselves." That's deep. And to make this about me for a second, because that's why we're all here, obviously. Usually when I'm reading, I don't go too far into analyzing or trying to see a bigger picture. I kind of just look at the words and go, okay, while drooling and blinking one eye at a time. But with this idea of talking dogs roaming the streets and everyone being cool with it, it immersed me and forced me to look through the eyes of a person watching this all unfold. So props to you, Kirsten Backus. Backies? I don't know how to say this! So props to you, Kirsten, for making me think. It's truly a feat worth acknowledging. Listen, I may have liked this book, but there's one thing I like more, which is to complain. Why go through the effort of reading a whole 300-page novel if I don't get to whine a little? To get right to the heart of my grievances, I hated Cleo. She felt like a self-insert. For some reason, the dogs take a liking to her with little to no explanation, and she's the only person who's allowed to get close to them on a personal level, despite her being a complete stranger to them, which would be all fine and dandy if she wasn't insufferable. Cleo starts the novel with a promise to the reader to describe the monster dogs and the impact they left on all of us. So you'd think we'd be seeing some unbiased perspective and get some in-depth journalism going here, but most of her entries are just about her and how the monster dogs affected her. Like, the next chapter after her little opening monologue is her telling us she just broke up with her long-term boyfriend. Girl, I don't care. And you might think I'm being dramatic, which, fair. But there's a scene, and this is like the climax of the book, by the way, where we're at this big unveiling of a castle that the dogs have been building right in the middle of New York. Don't ask me, I don't know. And we're finally getting a more proper look at how the dogs are doing and how we're integrating after about 200 pages of Cleo telling us how hard it is for her to be YN, only for Cleo to realize that we haven't talked about her for like almost a full paragraph, God forbid. And so she starts talking about the dress she's wearing.
Cleo!
There's a walking, talking Great Dane behind you with human hands, and you think my main concern is what you're wearing? There are more pressing issues!
My diamond earring came off in the ocean and it's gone. And there's people that are dying.
I just feel like her narration was very Cleo-centered, which is objectively the least interesting part of the situation she's in. I would have rather read 100 more pages of cow leg rearrangement than sit through a second more of Cleo's relationship problems. Speaking of relationship problems, great segue. At the end of the book, it's revealed that Ludwig, the dog, was in love with Cleo, the human woman? I'm sorry, what? What could that have possibly added to the progression of the story? And it wasn't platonic, guys. I wish it was. Case in point, I would have enjoyed this book a lot more if it was just written about the monster dogs and their creation the entire time, and if we didn't include the whole dog in love with human thing. Just a thought. Just my 2 cents. But other than that, it was one of the most entertaining books I've read in a while. I thought it was a really interesting idea, and in my humble opinion, which is worth a lot, it was executed beautifully. Also, the cover art was nice. Okay, peace.